Alright, welcome back guys to another Roblox tutorial video. This video we're going to be covering what I like to call advanced basics. Essentially what I cover when we talk about advanced basics are two factors. It's going to be organization of a game and specifically your workspace, and then also talking a little bit about lighting and some of the various things you can do there. So if you followed along with the Roblox basic tutorial, here's a nice little sample couple of parts I created. Now, the danger with doing what I did in the last video over here in your Explorer tab is you have a whole bunch of different parts here, right? It's very hard to tell what part is what. And if let's say I made this one red and I made this one yellow, and then I came back later after, I drank some coffee, slept, came back, and I was working with somebody, right? It'd be very difficult to tell, that this part right here in the workspace is the one that's glitched, right? As you can see, for whatever reason, when I made it yellow, it glitched out on me. Let's just try and fix that. Doesn't look like one that's fixed itself, but anyways, you guys get the point here. As over here, all I see is part, and I don't really know what goes with what. So a good way to kind of avoid that confusion altogether is to use two different organizational tools. The very first one we're going to look at is the idea of a folder. A folder is an organizational tool in Roblox Studio. It's right here, and it's very similar to a computer folder on a desktop. So if I was on my desktop here and I had, for example, coding classes or coding recording classes, that is essentially the same thing. It's an active directory which you can organize objects. Now, so the other way to organize things inside of Roblox Studio is to use models. So for example, I can take all these parts here and group them together into a singular model here, and I can rename this model, for example, obby1 or obstacle1, whatever you want to name it. To create a model, all you're going to do is select the parts either here or here that you want to make into a model. You right click and click group, and then the keyboard shortcut for it is Control-G. Then if you want to ungroup, again, you right click and you would click ungroup, and then the keyboard shortcut is Control-U. So if you just want to do this quickly, you would just click on any model, ungroup it, now you can work with it, and then when you're all done with that model, you can group it back together. So these are the two different organizational tools, and I'm a huge advocate of. So let's look at an example. Let's say I call this folder obby here, and let's say I call the second folder checkpoints, or CK for short. Here I'll drag in my spawn location here so I know that's there, and then after, maybe I might come here and do some manipulation with these parts and move them around, and then start looking at this guy and moving them together. And then once I kind of get a feel for how I want things to be organized and collected, I can then come here. Maybe I don't want these parts anymore. Maybe I don't want this. Well, it looks like there's a lot of duplicates here. Maybe this is the first part of my obby here is just this. I can then come here and grab all these parts and group them together into a singular model and call this obby1. Right? You can also click F2 to quickly rename things, and then I'll drag that into this folder, so that way when somebody opens up my workspace or anybody looks over here, it's very nicely, neatly organized. Now, the cool thing with models is that they act differently after they are grouped together. Notice the scale tool here works very differently when working with a model. The same with the rotate here, also works very differently as well. So keep that in mind whenever you model things or group things together like this. They act different. If you ever want to access the individual parts, you can always ungroup a model, start clicking on the individual parts, and then when you're all done, select everything and group it all back together. Very effective organizational tool. And you would come back, rebuild, rename this obby1. And there you go. So just a nice, very straightforward way of organizing all your objects inside the game here. So everything is nice and neat. Now, in order to access the second thing in this tutorial, which is going to be the lighting. Lighting is a service inside of Roblox Studio, which is right here. And there's a bunch of different properties that you can access here inside of lighting. You can access, for example, the time of day it is, whether you want it to be day or night here. You can also access some color shifting things as well as some ambience here. The main ways you change lighting, though, is generally done in the atmosphere, manipulating these four properties here. So The color is the overall color of your atmosphere, which is down here. Then up here is your sky, and you can get sky IDs here. You can create them in Photoshop, or you can grab an ID from the toolbox here as well. But essentially, this is your sky, this is your atmosphere. You can make the atmosphere as big as you want by changing the haze property. So the larger the haze property gets, the less of your sky is added, and the more of your atmosphere is added. Now, when you want to change the color of the atmosphere, you can go ahead and click here and drag to a specific color. Maybe you would want it to be kind of like this. And then if you want decay, you can add some decay. Now, you're probably wondering what decay is. So there's two elements going on here. There's the amount of color coming from the sun, and then there's the amount of color coming from the atmosphere. The atmosphere is haze, and then the glare is from the sun. So if I add glare here, you can see that my sun is very brightly shining in my obby here. And then oftentimes you'll have a color shift as well. So the color shift is how much this will change and how much everything kind of blends together here. So some important lighting concepts, and as you see here, I can always come in here again and change things like the clock time, and there's even some scripts on day and night cycles if you're interested in that. But here's just a basic changing of where the sky is. Now there's another really cool effect that I see sometimes done, but it could be done a ton more, and that's going to be to add a color correction effect. So this is going to go ahead and tint your sky a very specific color. So if you want to tint everything, you can come here and click tint, and let's say I want the whole obby to kind of have this blue tint to it, then you can kind of add that tint here, and it even tints the color here as well. You can add saturation as well, make it more, make it less, you know, kind of add some tint here. You can add some brightness, make it really bright, make it, you know, not so bright, somewhere in the middle here, and some contrast as well. So some other cool little lighting effects here. You can also manipulate some stuff as far as the intensity of the sun and the sun rays and the spread of it and how that interacts with the environment. But these will all be under the lighting service, and you know, if you play your game, you'll see it has a nice impact on how the game looks and feels. So there's just some advanced basic concepts. Again, the idea of taking everything that you create in your game and storing them in either models and then or folders, and then having everything under a folder here is very important for organization, because at any given point in time, somebody needs to be able to come into your game model and look and identify what is going on, and this is another great way to do it. Now, the last thing I'm going to go ahead and exit out with here is some of the properties here in the Properties tab. And I'm going to talk a lot about this later, especially when we talk about scripting and some of the scripting mechanics. But over here in the Properties tab, you have very many different properties. You not only have color and material type, but you also have transparency. That dictates how see-through a part is. 1 stands for 100% transparent, 0 is not transparent at all. Locked is mainly used for team create, so somebody can't manipulate this part once it's already been placed into a game. You can change the parents here by manipulating that property right here. Size is the size of the part given X, Y, and Z, position in the world, orientation, its origin, all that kind of stuff. How it pivots is right here as well. Can collide stands for the collision. So if you want it to collide with other things in the game, then you need this checked. It's a Boolean. If you don't want it to collide, then you would turn it off. And then can it query? Query stands for accessing data. You don't have to worry about that too much, but a query in programming is essentially asking a database information. You don't have to worry about that. And then can you touch it, i.e. can you trigger a touch event, is right here as well. Anchored means that it is immovable by forces. So do you want it stuck in this place? If so, then you would check mark the anchor box here. You can also add some physical properties, such as if you want the friction to be different, elasticity, density, all that kind of stuff is here as well. If you want custom physical properties, do you want it to be massless? The shape, if you want it to be a different shape, that is here as well. And then assembly, linear, and angular velocity. If you want it to move when your game starts, so let's say I want this to move like directly up in the sky, I would give it 100 linear velocity here, and when the game when the game plays. Let's see here, did I click on the right parts? Let's do 500. Let's make this not anchored. There we go. Kind of shoots all the way up in the sky here, as you can see, and then it falls back down. So that's the linear velocity here is going to affect things like that. Angular velocity as well will add, a rotation. So linear is these directions here. If you look on my screen here, linear means directional based. So like this would be, X. This in programming it's Z. So in game design Z, this is not Z. Z normally in math is this way, but this is not Y. This is Z in Roblox, and then Z is up and down like this. So if I wanted to shoot, or excuse me, Y is up and down. Z is this one, and then X is this one. So if I want this to shoot straight in the sky, I would give it that linear velocity. Angular velocity is turning. So if I wanted to turn around the x-axis a specific way, I would set angular velocity. This would be Z, and then this, so this would be X, and this would be Y. So those are the different types of velocities and what they do. Again, you can kind of see this spin out crazily. If I play this, it's flew in the sky, now it's spinning. So now you see it spinning because I gave it that velocity. So you can always play around here, but these are the various different properties, and you can manipulate them and do really cool things with them. So some advanced basics there. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video.